Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with all of you today, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to Pattern for Progress's monthly housing webinar series. Our webinar series has been generously supported by NeighborWorks America. This month's live event includes a presentation and an opportunity for questions and answers with our guests. Today's conversation, a multicultural approach to food and housing. We are very excited and pleased to bring an amazing organization and an initiative to be presented by two incredible leaders from the West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation, which is based in Providence, Rhode Island. Today, we're here to listen and explore how this community-based organization puts their mission into practice by promoting the development of healthy, sustainable communities through housing development and revitalization activities with a host of incredible services for both residents and businesses in the West Elmwood neighborhood of Providence. More specifically, we're going to hear about the Sankofa Initiative, which is a model approach to community building that recognizes the importance of using knowledge from the past to make positive change for the future. The initiative addresses community challenges through increased access to the healthy foods that are traditional to the West End's ethnically diverse community. Before I introduce each panelist, I want to take a moment to frame today's discussion. While help is on the way in terms of the stimulus funds for individuals, for families, for businesses, and for local governments, clearly the pandemic has caused a great deal of severely negative economic conditions across the country and in the Hudson Valley. Last month, we focused on the eviction moratorium, and thankfully, the American Rescue Plan includes some $50 billion for things like rent relief and mortgage assistance. Additionally, many people have been faced with food insecurities along with education and childcare issues. Hopefully, the stimulus package will make the lives of our residents and communities a little less painful. I'd like to quickly introduce each of our speakers and then get right into the presentations. I'm confident they will inspire you and will likely spur your creative thinking on how to meet the local needs in our communities. Joining us today is Maria Carvalho, Executive Director of West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation, which is a NeighborWorks America Community Development Corporation. They work to create healthy and sustainable communities. Prior to assuming leadership of the organization, Maria was the Initiative Director for the Dunamis Synergy. Maria spent 23 years working for the College Crusade, administering the high school and post-secondary programs. Maria was awarded the Dr. David Swedlow Memorial College Access Practitioner Award of Excellence from the National College Access Network and received the Leader in Action Award from New England Counselors of Color Bridging Access to College. Maria holds a master's in adult education from the University of Rhode Island and a bachelor's in human services from Springfield College. Our second presenter today will be Melanie Borges. Melanie has worked exclusively in the not-for-profit industry her entire career. As the project manager for the Sankofa Initiative, Melanie has a lot on her plate. She runs the day-to-day activities with the overarching objective to improve food access to the West End of Providence, which includes supporting the community gardens, the seasonal farmers market, and the community kitchen. Melanie worked with the agency through their Dunamis Synergy initiative, serving as a family coach, supporting parenting students as they work toward their career and education goals. Melanie became a certified master gardener through the University of Rhode Island. Their passion and commitment to their work and community will become very clear to all of you as they go through their presentations. After the presentations today, we're going to open up the webinar to the audience for a question and answer period to share experiences and thoughts. Please type your questions into the Q&A box, and we're trying to get to all of them the best we can. So I'll stop talking right now, and we're going to introduce Maria to start us off. Maria, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, my slides. So good morning, everybody. My name is Maria Carvalho, and I am the Executive Director at the West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation. West Elmwood was founded by residents and stakeholders who actually took action to address issues of abandoned properties and vacant lots throughout the West End. Our mission is to promote the development of healthy and sustainable communities. We were established in 1970, and we've been working with residents and stakeholders to meet the needs and create opportunities locally. Over time, we have had many strategic partnerships and had resulted in a growth of our agency and the programs that we offer. Next slide. So this is kind of, the list of our programming. And so, when I think about, West Elmwood, we have this like business side of us, and then we also have like our social service side. And so, all of our programs, ultimately, they aim to improve the economic, educational, health, and well-being outcomes for our community. We value community input, and we have residents at our planning tables embedded in all of our initiatives. And so the first thing I like to talk about is our asset management. West Elmwood has 192 rental units within our community. And some are low income, some are affordable, and then we have some market rate apartments as well. We have a management company that actually manages and oversees, but on the asset management side, the business sense of that, West Elmwood is very involved in. We also have real estate development where we build new homes and work in cities across the state to redevelop and foreclosing vacant housing. We have rehabbed over 285 units, and we have several projects that are underway currently. Our real estate development is also tied to our home ownership center. And our home ownership center, we provide classes in home buyer education for first-time home buyers. We do a lot of financial and rental counseling for the community. We have a financial capabilities curriculum that we have in our home buyer education. We understand that, folks' lives are very demanding. And so there are 3 options that we have available for folks. We try to meet people where they're at, so you can do, a self-directed learning component. You could, complete the class over the weekend. We also have classes that meet 2 times a week for a couple of weeks. So we try to make that accessible and available to everyone. Ultimately, where our hope is that we can get home buyers to purchase the homes that we rehab. We also have small lending services available through the CDFI program, where we give loans for home improvement and beautification projects and home repairs. We have counseled over 5,000 clients and have about 685 have achieved home ownership. Also out of our home ownership center is our match saving initiative program, where we do a dollar-for-dollar match of up to $1,000. And the program is designed to assist individuals with low to moderate income on a path toward asset ownership through the match savings. And we have a financial education component to that. That's a requirement of the program. And so these funds are used to support purchases of houses, maybe help you with a deposit and first month's rent to get a new apartment, educational expenses, or use the money to help develop maybe a business that you might have for yourself as well. We've even had participants purchase their first cars, and for the education piece, we're using the Your Money, Your Goals, which is a financial literacy curriculum that the Bureau of the Consumer Financial Protection uses. And so it's, the program is tied to the curriculum. In addition to that, you have a housing counselor that's available to you to help you establish a savings account, commit to weekly savings, maybe help you repair your credit and so on, so that we provide that support for you to that pathway of home ownership. The Dunamis Synergy Initiative that Joe has mentioned, it's a 2-generation initiative supporting parenting students with their education and career aspirations while supporting their children for successful futures. Dunamis utilizes the Aspen Institute Ascend framework, which establishes a 2-generation approach that focuses on the children and their parents together. This approach is ultimately designed to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty for families. The framework sets forth that, a post-secondary early education, economic supports, social capital development, health and well-being are all core elements that are required to create an intergenerational cycle of opportunity for these families. Our vision is to establish a learning community where parents and children are striving together to achieve their educational aspirations. That gets passed on from one generation to the next, and in this model, we also have family coaches that are working with these families to reduce barriers so that they persist in school. Families have access to emergency funds that they can utilize for, upcoming, unanticipated expenses, car repairs, maybe a book that you need for school or what have you. We also have a resource closet that's available to those families where they can get access to things like diapers, wipes, bottles, and playpens to help support safe sleep efforts and things of that nature. The second piece of Dunamis is that we are ultimately looking for a site where we're thinking to build between 30 and 50 units and have a daycare in this building that'll support these young families so that they have, an apartment that they can afford. Because we all know that when someone has stable housing, that typically all of their outcomes improve. Excuse me. The next is our health equity zone. And the health equity zone is an innovative place-based approach that brings people together to build healthy, resilient communities. West Elmwood serves as the backbone organization for the collective. And our collective, which is referred to as our CAT team, Community Action Team, is comprised of all organizations within our West End that are serving the community. And so what we've done is we've engaged all of our stakeholders. We assessed the needs of the community through various events. We had speak outs, we did surveys, we did phone-a-thons to just get what people's input on what healthy community means to them and what healthy community looks like, and what are the things that are troubling them within the community that we could work together to resolve. And so, that component is all about, residents and organizations working together to combat the social determinants of health, and just to build well-being within the community. We also have a resident advisory committee that works with us as well through the health equity zone. And right now they're working on some vaccine hesitancy outreach, in response to COVID. But they have been with us through COVID side by side, helping us to get information out to the community. And it wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about COVID. And so, as part of our health equity zone, we had received some CARES Act funding that allowed us to really respond and support our community through this pandemic. And, we established a team of community health workers that were providing supports to families in isolation and quarantine. We were a distribution center and still are for PPE. We have hosted pop-up testing sites. We've partnered with a local pharmacy who provided testing for us, stable testing, because once winter came in, we weren't able to do the pop-up testing outside anymore, and so we were able to provide our community with that everyday access to testing. And so that was really tremendous. West Elmwood is considered high dense community where disproportionately we have higher rates of COVID, but we also have limited access to, testing and, quarantine supports and things of that nature. So, that's been very important. We are, as a HES in this work, we also advocate. And so, we worked with the Department of Health to, help develop and provide culturally linguistic information on access to testing, educational awareness, how to keep your home clean, how do you isolate, and now on the vaccination. We were also able to provide over $200,000 to the community for home stabilization support. So helping people with their rent, utility bills, and so forth. For those that have, lost their jobs and things of that nature. We have had a couple of food drives, and we're also providing basic needs. And the last is the Sankofa Initiative. And I'm just going to touch on that just a little bit, but Sankofa is a collaboration that was created in response to a call from West End for fresh food that was nutritious, local, and culturally relevant. And, Sankofa, we have community gardens all around us, and we have the Sankofa housing, and it's just a really incredible initiative. And I'm going to let Melanie continue with that. You're muted, Joe. I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Technical difficulties. All I can say is, oh my goodness, you must be working 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I mean, those programs are absolutely amazing. So comprehensive. And the way you've described the programs, it seems as though they're so tangible, and they're so strong for the ability to mitigate generational poverty. And that's the beauty of it. You're working through education, healthcare, food, supportive resources. It's just a wonderful thing. So I appreciate all of those bits of information. There's one thing I wanted to ask you about, actually, before we go on to Melanie. A while back, your agency created an adaptive reuse development called brownfield mills. And I was wondering if you could touch on that just a little bit, or we can come back to that later on. And it was an enormous project, I thought, and it was very important to the neighborhood.
And yeah, so the brownfield mills is actually our Westfield commons and lofts, and so. Okay. That's part of our asset development, but it was a huge environmental undertaking. It was a former factory, because this is West Elmwood. Prior to this, it was an industrial neighborhood, and so we're surrounded by that. And that was before my tenure. Right. But yeah, it was an amazing project that. Folks thought that, the former leadership, what are you thinking? But, she was very determined. It's an amazing establishment, and it's like 69 units, and it's right across the street from us. So,
yeah, the reason I wanted to touch on just a little bit is because I see so many similarities in your community with the legacy cities that we have here in the Hudson Valley. And adaptive reuse is just so important to getting rid of those issues, those problematic buildings, yes, and rebuilding community. Right. And it just fits so well with all of those other comprehensive programs that you're doing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And so now we'll turn the mic over to Melanie. And Melanie, you just jump right into the Sankofa Initiative. Welcome, good morning, and thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Joe, for having us, and Pattern for Progress for hosting us and inviting us to come speak. I'm very grateful to be here and happy to get to follow behind my leader and speak a little more on the Sinkhole Initiative that I manage. So like Joe said, my name is Melanie Borges, and I am the Sankofa Project Manager. I manage the Sinkhole Initiative in its entirety. So as he noted, we do have three main pieces under the Sankofa Initiative. It's a community farm, which is made up of 3 community gardens and 1 pretty beautiful community greenhouse, our weekly seasonal farmers market, and our community kitchen, which is a shared use industrial level commercial kitchen that up and coming culinary professionals can rent out and book space. Our Sankofa logo, I felt it was very important just for folks to get a visual. I placed it on this slide to help folks understand, the word Sankofa. Most people are like, wait, what is that? And I think to really honor what we're doing, it's very important to know the word is from Ghana, and it does mean to go back and get it. So it refers to the importance of, using knowledge from the past to achieve progress. And you see the bird, and she's reaching back to grab an egg off her own back. And that's the logo that we used really to honor and reflect the neighborhood that we're in has such diverse and rich cultures. And we want to make sure we have a space for our folks to highlight and honor that in the food world. So next slide, please. The first element I'd love to show you guys and chat about is our Sankofa World Market. So this market takes place each Wednesday afternoon, starting at the end of June, and it will run for 18 weeks until the end of October. The market takes place on a library lawn, a public library lawn, right on Elmwood Avenue, which is a very busy street in the west end of Providence, a main thoroughfare, you could say, for our neighborhood. We have a super, super cool, diverse mix of vegetables that are available to our neighborhoods through our market vendors. So I noted some of them in the list, but bitter ball, bitter melon, sweet potato greens. This past season, when I came into the role in July, I learned very quickly that there was a lot of vegetables I didn't know about yet, and I wanted to try them all. And that's, I think, something that makes Sankofa so special. We have growers, vendors, gardeners from, all corners of the earth. We have a super big West African community, Latino community. We have a lot of different Asian nations represented. So we have these different produce options that folks who move here, when you come from a space that, whether you are a refugee or you're leaving in whatever way, you show up, you want to feel welcome, you want to feel a piece of home with you. And I think that the market really does provide that in, having these culturally relevant produce available. And before we move on, I did want to note also a big important piece of our market is it does accept the SNAP, EBT, and WIC payment forms, which opens up, of course, it opens up the doors for all shoppers. I mean, of course, regardless, goes without saying, but we see often the majority in the 2019 and 2020 season, majority of our transactions were through SNAP and EBT. The majority of our transactions happens from 02907 residents. So we're seeing our neighborhood and they're in there heavy. They're coming every week. They're using their assistance to get the produce they need. So we're very, very happy that we're there to serve that need, for our community. And you can move to the next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. Here we see, this picture makes me smile. This was a fall garden cleanup you see on the right, but talk to you a little bit about the Sankofa Community Farm, which has a special place in my heart as a gardener myself. Our Sankofa Community Farm is made up of 3 community gardens throughout the west end of Providence. You could walk to all of them depending on how lazy and ambitious you're feeling. I say it's walkable. So we have 3 community gardens at 67 garden beds overall. It's 30,000 square feet throughout the 3 sites. It's had a wait list. I've never not had a wait list for the garden beds, which is a good problem to have. This is the first year. I almost had one opening and it got gobbled up literally within the hour. So I'm happy to say that. Our space, for me, I see it, it's an invaluable resource. You have folks able to grow food, like I said, that is native to where they may have came from for their families, as well as to bring to the market, as I showed you in the previous slide, to sell for revenue. A garden bed that, as you see in this picture, looks kind of basic, maybe small or average. The amount of food that we see coming out of them is impressive, to say the least. It's wild. Like last year, I was floored seeing some of the harvest that just come out of, I have 1 bed at your garden here. I have 2 beds over there. And then on Wednesday, we're at the market and the table is just this pile of beautiful, radishes and different colorful produce. And I'm like, this is all grown, in our neighborhood. This isn't an industrial farm. No one has acres of land in a rural area. These are our neighbors that are growing in cities. And, we're very, very happy that we get to be that place for folks in the West End to grow their food. And our greenhouse, I will note before we move on, I don't have a picture of it here, but our greenhouse is also, anyone who's in the garden world knows, a wild, awesome resource to have in your repertoire. When you can start your seedlings earlier in the spring, you lock in and ensure that you'll have more produce to sell at the early farmers markets. Now, my market this season starts June 23rd. If you look at, a Rhode Island planting calendar, if you were doing things by the books, most folks won't have full tables of bounty to sell on June 23rd. But if you were to have a greenhouse space, perhaps in an affordable greenhouse in your neighborhood, you can start those seedlings earlier and then have more food to sell at those early markets, therefore having a little more financial, strength in those early months. And you can move to the next slide, Joe. Thank you. And here I'll chat with you just a little bit about our Sankofa Community Kitchen. So our kitchen is it's shown here in that photo, it's a commercial use shared community kitchen. Please note I added photos that were pre-corona for nostalgia to make us smile. That's very much an older photo, so we're being very safe in our space. We have 6 community culinary businesses of varying levels in their business, I could say, different stages, who rent space in our community kitchen. So it's a shared use, as you can see there, beautiful, clean, nice space for someone who may be starting their culinary business, but doesn't have the wherewithal yet to buy a building, to buy a restaurant. I mean, that's no light task. So we make sure that we can offer opportunities for folks to kind of incubate their startups, get situated, get ready. We have I'm very happy to say we have the most affordable rate for hourly kitchen use in the city and perhaps in the state, unless someone's opened in the last month or so. But last time I checked, we make sure that our space can be used in our community and for residents. So we have this community kitchen, and right to the right of it is a large kind of general space community room. So that can be adapted for a lot of different things. Now, in the middle of a pandemic, of course, folks weren't meeting as much inside, but there were some things that had to happen. So for example, the 2020 census, super important initiative. West Elmwood was really pushing and helping the West End get counted. We had census trainings US Census held trainings in our community room. They said, it's so hard for us to find space to book. And the agency knew that this is an important resource. We need to be there for them. So we had census trainings. We also are happy to host it's a grocery delivery program in the state called Cartwheel, Rhode Island, and it's a free grocery delivery program for folks who utilize SNAP. When the pandemic first kind of hit, a big issue that was shining in everyone's faces right away was, wow, grocery delivery, that there's no one accepting SNAP. Peapod's not accepting it. Maybe you can buy your food offline, Walmart or Amazon. You're not getting it that night. You're not getting it that next day. You're not able to plan for your family. So hearing that Cartwheel was doing this great work and they needed a space to do it out of, Sankofa Community Kitchen was happy to be that place. So we're that sole distribution and packing site for Cartwheel, as well as, like I said, the 6 other culinary businesses that are working, for-profit hustling chefs. So we're really happy to have that space serve multiple uses, I'd say, and we're always trying to be creative about ways that we can open our doors safely to help the community in ways that they might need, in the culinary world or even just in general use space. So in regards to the 3 elements, that's kind of what I wanted to tell you guys about. I could talk all day about either of them, but I tried to keep it succinct for our presentation and to respect everyone's time.
Oh, that's terrific, Melanie. Before we actually open the room up for Q&A, I actually have a couple of follow-ups.
Please, yes.
How has your delivery model changed? I mean, we've been living the way we're living for a year now. How have you changed your delivery model during the pandemic and now as we're starting to reopen? Have things changed in your management and operation systems?
There's been, I guess the short answer is, Yes. So there's been adaptations and changes that have had to happen in the past year since I came on, that we were kind of ready for and maybe kind of not. So, you know, working in a garden, I have the benefit of being able to meet folks outside, right? Perhaps safely outside. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, you know, I have a lot of my growers are older. Definitely most of them are over 60. So we had a lot of folks who didn't feel safe maybe coming to my garden meeting or coming to check in and drop off payment. Maybe they're sending their niece. So there was kind of that moment where I was like, I need to stay connected. So making sure, I always say this to my vendors, like, I'm so grateful I've met your kids, because the sons and daughters of a lot of the vendors end up being my go-to to sometimes get communication flowing, whether it be a language barrier or just, you know, like I can even think of my own mom or dad. Sometimes they just don't answer. They're busy. I was in the backyard. So having the intergenerational support and getting to know folks' families has really helped me manage the initiative. I know that seems like an informal way, but it genuinely is a great way to stay connected with everyone we work with.
Sure. And Melanie, you mentioned language barriers. You know, earlier this month, or in February, I guess it was, when we were first discussing this, you mentioned how many different languages are spoken in the neighborhood?
So within my 3 gardens I can speak for, there's over 12 languages spoken. So because we have such, of course, a beautiful and diverse population, we have folks from multiple nations within Africa that these dialects or these languages, it's, you know, I have one woman from Burundi, a few women from Rwanda, Senegal, you know, so I have a really great translator, a gentleman by the name of Antoine, that I met through a refugee organization in our city. And he's been really gracious to help. He speaks, I think, maybe 17 different dialects. This man is, it's so impressive. So he helps me get some of that messaging out when we have, you know, spring garden cleanups, or, hey, it's time to get your applications in for those garden beds. He helps with that. And he's a great resource. It's very important. I don't, you know, we want everyone to know everything. Language should never be a reason to be left out.
Right. And food brings all of us together.
And that's the thing, you know, with all of those languages spoken, you can go into the garden at any time and people are helping each other even without using words. They don't really care that they can't chat with each other. It's not a hindrance. And I think that's beautiful. A lot of us could learn from that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I think we're gonna open up our videos to everybody else, and we'll give that a couple of minutes to populate. Michelle, are we in good shape?
You sure? You want to invite them into the room?
I do.
All right, give me a couple of seconds there. So you are welcome to turn on your video and audio, and that way we have a little bit more on in-person interactions. We're bringing in all of our attendees. Let's take a couple of minutes.
Michelle, can everybody hear if we're going to just kind of continue the conversation as they enter? Terrific.
Absolutely. Yep. So if there's somebody who wants to get started asking some questions, feel free to do that.
Yeah, if everyone can hear us, that's perfect. So I'm going to a couple of really good questions so far. First one, so much great information that we can apply here in Newburgh. Will you be sharing this recording in community planning board members to review? Yes, this is being recorded and we're going to share it for sure. Let's see, next, do you have cooking classes open for customers of the market? So Melanie, I think that's for you.
Yeah, so we have not had a cooking class at the market yet, but what we do have through our Sankofa community kitchen, one of our chefs has been kind enough to kind of let me know she'd be open for some family-friendly culinary education. So as I plan our future workshops, I have someone in place that's ready to lead that. So that's something we're looking forward to this summer and fall, even through a Zoom way if we had to.
jump into another question. Does your program compete with the local farmers market? Good question.
That is a good question. So our farmers market is a part of the Farm Fresh Rhode Island statewide farmers market network. Each farmers market within that network is definitely quite different from the next. They all have kind of their own feel, as well as, you know, they're all in their own neighborhood. So they have their regulars. So when it comes to compete, I don't know if that's the right word. I would say we definitely stand on our own. We're super special. And I think that as I spread the word of us more and more, I hope to see, you know, people from other markets giving us a try this summer, and folks who come to my market, maybe trying a market on the other side of town. So I wouldn't say compete, but we're definitely holding our own. We're definitely very busy, and I'm proud of that.
Okay. It's, you know, the community and the way you describe things, it almost sounds more like it would be collaboration and trying to help lift everyone up as opposed to, you know.
Absolutely.
Another great question. What was the process with local government to get this approved? That approval through the government systems can be extraordinarily difficult. You know, here in New York State, we have so many different layers of government and approval processes. So can either of you answer that question?
Is the question in pertinence to the market specifically, or the Food Access Initiative as a whole? I just want to clarify before we answer.
Let me go back to the person who asked that question.
That was Valerie.
Valerie, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is Valerie with us? Valerie, unmute yourself and jump on in.
Okay, so I'm with the Nanuet Chamber of Commerce and the local civic in Nanuet, and I'm a realtor and very involved in my community. And I'm thinking we're going to be doing a downtown project near our railroad station. I would love to incorporate something like this. A lot of people don't see progress as something farmers anything initiative as part of the future generation. How do I encourage the older people, not the kids? My daughter is totally on board with this. She's a little hippie. She's hiking the Appalachian Trail right now. She's looking for opportunities to do stuff like this. So I want to kind of get her engaged, but how do I encourage the older population so they don't push back on something like this?
I think, you know, it's really about speaking to the benefits and to the folks that you are serving, you know, to get the older generations involved. And it could even be you know, to get them involved in the gardening, you know, to maybe have, you know, beds that folks are able to, you know, kind of like test the waters on. But I think it's really about showing, you know, the need for the food, right? First and foremost, to like affordable, healthy food. We know a lot of times healthy food costs a lot more money than the processed food, right? And so, you know, I think that when you talk about the nutritional benefits, the health benefits, you know, the access to food for people who may not be able to afford food, you really can't argue against those kinds of things, I think. And I'm sure that, you know, what we did prior to even setting up the garden beds was we did a community-wide food assessment for the whole city that actually showed the need for, you know, locally culturally relevant food. You know, the biggest complaint from our community, and, you know, as you know, it's very diverse, was that American food, the processed food, was making them sick. And that they, you know, in order to find like greens from their culture, or the, you know, the different vegetables, they would have to go out of town to access them. Well, we didn't have that locally. And so, you know, it helps to further support and make that push, you know. And so that, you know, the assessment talked about the radius of where, you know, culturally relevant food was, you know, the cost, the access to, and things of that nature. And I think that, you know, that would probably be like a really good place to start.
Maria, you know, that makes me think about many of our communities, especially our small cities, when I say small, Providence is what, 180,000 people. That's a good sized city. The biggest city we have here in the Hudson Valley is Yonkers, which is about 200,000. But the cities further up in the Hudson Valley are probably 25, 30,000. And many of them have what we call a food desert. Is that the same that's going on there in Providence? And has this helped kind of get over that barrier?
I think absolutely. The response from the results of the assessment showed that it was a food desert, and that there was transportation issues with people getting access to food. Right, things weren't on bus lines or that kinds of things. It talked about the limited amounts of food available to folks, and the diversity of the food available to folks. So I think that's definitely lends to that.
Okay. Let's see, Lisa Burton, we have a question. The matching funds to assistance with down payment. Sorry, I lost your question. Technical difficulties. Hang on, folks. Lisa, if you're on, just jump right in. I don't want to reinterpret your question.
Hi. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you.
Matching funds for first-time home buyers, $1,000 is so insignificant in the Westchester market. I was wondering how you guys got your funding. In Westchester, we're kind of tied to a high-income community with low-income people needing help with housing, but our housing market is so hot and so outsized. So yeah. I was wondering if you had the same problem, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, first, the funding actually came from an anonymous donor who wanted to help support young families. And so that's where the funding came from. And we were very, gracious to receive that donation. It came in very handy. And also, Rhode Island, our housing prices have gone up significantly in a short amount of time. The last housing report indicated that you had to make at least $70,000 a year to even be approved for a mortgage. And so it's a big challenge for us as well. And we haven't had a family actually, say that our matching funds help them purchase a home, but we have helped people get, an apartment. We have had like some of one of the Sankofa caterers actually bought a delivery truck. So she actually delivers to houses in her van now with her company logo on it. We've had one of the Dunamis families purchase her first car, and we have a cute shot of her and her baby. She's really proud in front of her car. So I think that, while we, hoped that, that money would allow people or support people to first-time home buyer, I think that we are faced with the same challenges as well.
Yeah, Marie, our market, specifically in Westchester County, which borders the Bronx, New York City, yeah. Median home price down there is some $625,000. And then, of course, in New York State, our tax structure on a house like that could be 16, 18, 20,000 alone. So,
right.
Putting together all of these little funding pieces in a market like that is extraordinarily difficult. So, I have another follow-up question for either of you. How do you fund the Sankofa Initiative? Do you have core funding? Is there a revenue stream that comes in for the kitchen? How does that work?
I can probably answer that. And so there is no one mainstream, right, for Sankofa. So we have, our pens are constantly, searching and looking for grants. So, sure. We've been fortunate to collaborate, and West Elmwood is very into partnership and collaboration. And so, we've worked with our Providence Healthy City office to submit grants. We've have worked as a collective to submit grants like to USDA. So we're constantly doing writing grants for things of that nature. You know, we have small revenue streams from, you know, the kitchen use, the garden beds. It's very minimal, but it does help. You know, Melanie is a one-woman department, and then she's allowed seasonal help for the farmers market. We get a market manager in, and then we always have a Vista person that helps her along the way as well. So, you know, we're trying not to incur a lot of expenditures within that program.
Okay. And we've got two other questions. We'll turn to Elizabeth from Hudson River Housing. Hudson River Housing is a NeighborWorks affiliate here in the Hudson Valley. So Elizabeth, go ahead, turn your mute off. Thanks. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, we have a very similar initiative that Hudson River Housing has spearheaded here in Poughkeepsie with a community kitchen. And I'm curious if you have a process for selecting businesses to be part of the kitchen. And if so, if you could talk a little bit about what criteria you use to make those decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So within the Sankofa Community Kitchen, you know, our goal is to always help, you know, empower and mobilize folks who need it most. So when I have different applicants or folks who reach out to me interested about the kitchen, I kind of have some questions I go through to find out where they're at in the process of their business. Is this their first community kitchen they've been in? What's their plan for the year? What's their plan for 3 years? I always like to make sure that, you know, our space is beautiful, but it's not massive, you know, it's not a zillion stories. So I always want to make sure that we have the capacity to take them on in their need. So I think it's a little of both. It's a little bit of making sure that we have room, literally that we have room, and that they're matched up kind of with what our mission is. You know, we want to help folks who are within our community. We want to help folks who really need the help. We want to help folks who are trying, and maybe this is that last piece. You know, I had someone who just came on, who was their brothers actually, and they had been cooking out of a church basement for the past 2 years. And I'm talking like actual meal prep. Like these dudes were cooking weeks worth of, you know, salmon, green beans, sweet potato for folks in a church basement. And then the church would have like a bazaar or a random meeting and wouldn't tell them, and they'd arrive with all their stuff. And now that's hundreds of dollars that they're supposed to be, you know, of food they're supposed to be making, and you're in a church. So the priest is like, I'm sorry, guys. And they're like, okay, Father. So, you know, for me, that's a perfect example of a business who, you know, they had the funds to move on and to get a kitchen. And I wanted to be that space for them. And now that they're with us, it's like they're expanding, they're booming. So I think the short answer is it's a little of both. It's, do we have the capacity? And then also, is your business up to something we want to be aligned with? It's a little of both.
Jason, you have a question?
Yeah, it's just, hi, good morning, everybody.
Maybe a quick follow-up question if I could, which is, have you ever turned anyone away?
I can candidly answer that I did have to turn someone away who was trying to bake items that were infused in a way that we would not want to host that in our agency. And he was really upset with me, and I just was like, I'm sorry, sir, and I hope that you find a good kitchen, but unfortunately I can't host you here. We're literally a community kitchen. No. So yes, I had to turn someone away.
Jason?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jason. I'm from the Ecological Citizens Project. But I wanted to follow up on the point that Lisa made and Joe made about, you know, in the Hudson Valley, when we're, you know, thinking about how to establish community farms or urban farms in markets where housing prices are so high. You know, we've just engaged in an effort, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it, of working with cities, we saw, to identify lands that are kind of protected from housing development pressure. And those are kind of city parks or city-owned properties. And then signing license agreements like, we've done in Newburgh, the city of Newburgh, with the sanctuary at Crystal Lake, and then the city of Peekskill. And so I think, getting creative, especially, I know Providence probably has a different housing market dynamic, which you all seem to really be working with and solving, but getting creative about trying to find land that's already protected from the pressure of housing development so we can work on urban farms. And then we're just like you all, writing grants all the time, to try to make these things work. But then also thinking, we've been exploring in the city of Peekskill, community-owned solar development, where some of the profits would be held aside to fund long-term community farms. And so that's just an interesting discussion to start thinking about, how do we create these kind of community assets that throw off long-term funding for these sorts of things. But you all are doing such an inspirational job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Go ahead, I hear somebody.
Well, I have my hand up. I'm Miriam. I'm there as MD.
Okay, go ahead, Miriam. Good morning.
So I'm in New Rochelle. How are you?
Good.
And I really am interested in the idea of our local government with all this hyper development going on, instead of being so pro builders and begging for 10% affordable housing in these massive luxury units, that we use land to specifically build homes so that folks can own homes. And I kind of got the sense that one of your presenters said that they are looking to build several units and then have, I guess, a farm or a restaurant in that building. I want to hear more about that. How do we pitch this to our local government, who can't stop, partnering with developers, and instead of looking at their city and promoting and developing their own land for their citizens?
So the unit that I spoke about was actually for the Dunamis Synergy Initiative. And I think that West Elmwood is kind of unique, where they have this like housing plus model, like the Sinkhole housing plus food. Dunamis is education plus housing. And right now we're looking for land or a building to repurpose to provide housing for these young families while they're in school. And what we're trying to do is to further help organically grow this community of learners that are supporting one another. And we talked about having a childcare center within that building that the folks would have access to. But I think that, I think it's really about advocacy, and, connecting with your representatives and your council folks to speak to the ideas that you have, and to try to gain that support or momentum around pushing for affordable housing, for folks to purchase.
So yours is being funded privately or through grants? It's not working with your local government to do this? Like we were just talking about, the gentleman before mentioned, getting public land to grow gardens. And I think, again, we could get the public land to build. Well, they're building, they're giving them to developers to build, for very little return for the community. Our return is, you can get 10% of the housing, affordable housing in there. But the building comes in, luxury units. So it's still going to increase the market price for apartments, and most of them are rentals. Yeah. So are you working with your local government? Because I want to understand maybe how to get
Yes,
them
yes,
to?
we would be working with Rhode Island Housing, which is our local government on those projects. Absolutely.
Okay,
And they have a land trust. But I think also it's just about, we're in a very urban setting where there are land that is just, vacant and, blighted communities where, a lot of, these lands, these lots become, havens for, people dumping trash and things like that. And I think it's really about working in the betterment for the community. And so, a lot of times you'll have council people that'll say, hey, this lot, would you be interested in developing on that, kind of thing, it's riddled with mattresses, things like that. So I think it's really about just making, those connections and folks advocating for that. But we absolutely would be working with our local government.
okay.
The beauty about this, the program, when we're doing it live like this, it's being recorded. So this recording can be shared with your local governments. And I think it can be very much a learning tool for many people that are sitting on boards and councils. So feel free. I believe, Michelle, it's available on YouTube afterward, and we can send the links out.
That's right. It'll be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website.
Terrific. Well,
Yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes left, so we have, I think we have room for maybe one more question before we close. Anyone? I'm not seeing any hands up. All right. Well, thank you all for attending today. Maria, Melanie, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for having us, Joe. It was great.
Your programs are just absolutely amazing. I'd like to close by, thanking everybody again for attending. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors and investors in Pattern. And it includes Howard Hanna Rand Realty, the Carney Group, Community Preservation Corporation, RUPCO, Hudson River Housing, both of which are NeighborWorks organizations, the Leviticus Fund, Baxter Development, TD Bank, and of course, NeighborWorks America themselves for their generous sponsorship of our year-long presentation. So thank you once again, everyone. Maria, Melanie, have a great day. Enjoy the spring weather and getting everything planted. And we'll talk to everyone.